Welcome to Commercial UAV Expo, where the future of uncrewed aviation comes into focus. Across industries and environments, drones are redefining how we see, move, build, and protect. From energy inspections to flood mitigation, from disaster response to precision infrastructure mapping, this is where transformation takes flight. You'll hear from industry leaders tackling real-world challenges and see the technologies being used to overcome them. Autonomy, AI, BVLOS, and advanced data tools are more than emerging trends. They're proven solutions, reshaping operations across the globe. Immerse yourself in live demos, sit down with your peers, step onto the show floor and into the future. Today is about field-tested applications, proven ROI, and the people driving it forward. This morning's keynote explores what happens when innovation meets action and what it costs when it doesn't. You'll hear how a breakthrough operation in one of the world's most protected landscapes delivered insights that redefined collaboration and confidence. You'll see how leading enterprises are measuring success and proving the financial case for drones across entire organizations. You'll learn why automation doesn't eliminate the need for people, and why the expertise of commercial drone pilots is more essential than ever. You're surrounded by opportunity, on the show floor, in the sessions, in the people sitting next to you. The sky isn't the limit, it's the starting point. Let's get started. Welcome to Commercial UAV Expo.
Morning, everybody. Glad to see so many people made it after a night out in Vegas. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Matt Collins. I'm the content manager here with Commercial UAV Expo, and I'm so excited for today. We have a really action-packed second day. I hope everybody was able to join us last night for our welcome reception, and I'm ready to bring that energy from last night, that buzz, and bring it into today. I think our keynote session that we have set up for this morning is going to do exactly that. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, CEO and co-founder of Buzz Solutions, Kaitlyn Albertoli.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. What a great first day it was at the reception yesterday. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Kaitlyn Albertoli, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Buzz Solutions. At Buzz Solutions, we're a vision-powered intelligence solution, making sense of mass amounts of utility inspection data and turning it into actionable information. I want to start today by talking about what an incredible moment it is for drones in this space. The market is truly at an inflection point. Technology is becoming much more accessible and more cost-effective. Regulations are opening up for more ease of access to scaling drone programs. There are proven success stories beyond just buying a drone and piloting it, but now programs are starting to see real ROI and real benefit from these types of programs. And the industry is proving value at scale. There are some incredible examples of this today. And the world of possibilities is already a very long list, but it's only continuing to expand. First, we're seeing drones on the scene as drone as first responders in public safety and defense use cases. We're seeing inspections of critical infrastructure. We're seeing surveying and mapping leveraging drones and robotic technologies. And now we're seeing deliveries of packages, I guess, coming in the near future. And many of that, I would say, has led us to a world that I call as the art of the possible. We're starting to see what is possible for drones. And it's a really exciting time to be in the space. Many times we're seeing that programs are starting to scale with pie-in-the-sky type of applications and variability in the use cases. But too often, I find that people think about buying the drone, they get excited to test it out, they train the pilots, they get the licenses, and they get ready to get going. But then something happens in the program, and maybe it's not able to scale as quickly as they thought, or they may not see the ROI as fast as they thought. And so oftentimes, it can lead a program to stall, or for there to be hesitancy in moving the program forward. The number one reason that I've seen the lack of programs, the number one reason I've seen programs not scale has been a lack of ability to think about the workflow or to think about the outcome you're trying to achieve. So the central question I think we all should be asking ourselves as we're going through the conference this week is how do we cut through the noise of what's possible and start to really see the value and practical applications of how we can be leveraging drone technology today. Because the risk of the program not scaling really shouldn't be the fear, the hesitancy, or the driver for concern here. It should be the risk of inaction in the program. What does the cost of standing still and not scaling your program mean to you and to your organization? Is it massive efficiency losses of your teams? Is it high-risk exposure of putting your folks in environments which may be more dangerous or critical than if you were to send a drone? Is it overspending on operational costs? Or is it the missed opportunity to make sense of that data long-term? Not just one time, but being able to use the data inspection over inspection. So today, I want to talk about 5 tips that you can use for overcoming inaction in your program. How do you set a game plan for success of scaling your drone program? The first, of course, is building the why and focusing on the outcome for your program. Every program should have a clear why, from why are you investing in building a drone program? What problems are you trying to solve by leveraging drones? Who are the people that care about this outcome being successful? Focus on the outcome instead of the volume of activity of how you're leveraging your drones. Because the goal is not just flying drones to collect data, it's how you can achieve measurable success and outcomes by working with that data. What could that mean to your program for efficiency, safety, reliability, scalability, and sustainability of that program? Without a defined why, I've seen several programs fizzle or turn into one-off pilots that don't ultimately scale. And so how we've ultimately worked with many organizations to help them scale that program is think about the outcome you're trying to achieve, figure out on day one how you're going to work with that data to make it more successful for you. So 2, drone flights are just step 1, but the data is ultimately the valuable asset, and what you can do with that program can turn into much faster ROI very quickly. Many programs spend a lot of time on the purchasing and the getting of the licenses, but really the workflow is a key part of this solution as well. How are you going to focus on data storage, data management, analysis of that data, and finding multifunctional uses for that data beyond just that one specific use case that you start out with? Often we found that the successful programs are able to leverage the same collected data source for multiple different use cases and applications over time. Maybe it's trend analysis, maybe it's being able to do different types of detections with that workflow when you need it down the road. Maybe it's sharing it with different teams at your organization or even with cross-local organizations to be able to get more value from that data set. One example is being able to leverage the data to ultimately get some quick wins to build momentum. So that's number 3, is target early wins to get buy-in for your organization. One example that we've seen is a utility that we're working with who has really been focusing on the outcome. They said, hey, we need to understand where all of our insulators are deployed in the field. We have this data set that was collected for forestry. We need to understand where all of the insulators are located across tens of thousands of structures. This data set wasn't collected for the particular insulator identification use case. It was collected for forestry. They said, hey, can you do something with this data so you can help us get more value from it? We were able to take 90,000 images in 10 hours, analyze that data with 90% accuracy so they could understand where all the insulators were deployed. From that same data set, we were also able to get 2 other critical detections for them that helped them shape their workflow and how they were thinking about their maintenance for the next several years. So being able to get quick wins is highly important. One thing I want you to focus on is, how do you prove cost savings? How do you prevent downtime in your inspections? How do you integrate seamlessly into existing tools? Oftentimes we find that when you're thinking about the outcome, there's so many different ways that you could be successful with this program. But really thinking about 1 or 2 quick, high-value wins can be enough to gain momentum and start building that excitement within the team. And being able to bring the people along with you, to train them, to get them excited, to get them involved on day 1 so that they can help you scale that program as opposed to being a limitation for that program, we often find can help accelerate success. So that leads me into point number 4. Identify risks to scale and focus on the workflow. Scaling isn't just about the number of pilots you have, but it's about how successful can you make those pilots and how successful can you make the drones that you're buying to be able to plug them into your workflow and help enact organizational change for the positive. Involving the right people, like IT or operations or compliance, don't bring them into the program, I'm saying, all at once on day 1, but being able to get their input and have their involvement can really help avoid any sort of blockers to scaling down the road. We also find that being able to proactively address hurdles like data siloing or cybersecurity or regulatory shifts can really help accelerate the program as well when those are addressed early as a part of a pilot program or early days of scaling. And lastly, as I've already mentioned, be able to make the data an asset that continues to work for your team over time. So having it in a way that's easily accessible and usable, or maybe accessed by a couple different teams, can also be helpful. And lastly, I'll say building a repeatable ROI framework is highly important as well. And that doesn't just mean dollars and cents. While dollars and cents are highly important for ROI, that may not be what's most important on day one, and ROI can shift. But I think what's most important is creating a framework that leads you to repeatable and scalable success. And identifying which ROI is most important to help you get that quick win is also going to be key in helping you scale the program. So it's not just about money, it also can be about safety, it can be about improved skills of your workforce, it can be massive reduction in risk, it can be reduction in outage minutes. There's a number of different ROIs that we see our customers and our partners at utilities are working with today. But also be open to knowing those can shift over time, so keeping an ear to what's important with your program at any moment in time is highly important. So I'll leave you with this before I welcome TF up to the stage to join me for a fireside chat. I want to challenge you, as you're going through this conference today, I encourage you, what is the cost of your program standing still? What does that mean to your organization? In order to be able to scale your program, just 3 key takeaways. Start with the why and the outcome, prove the value quickly to be able to get more buy-in, and think about scale and workflows, keeping ROI in mind as you're looking to build the most successful program. The risk is real in not getting started. There are so many people who have amazing examples of how they've been able to scale their programs now. So we should be, as an industry, looking to lean on those folks, learn from their lessons, learn from their successes, and be able to collaborate so we can move the industry forward more effectively. With that, I'm excited to welcome TF, who's Dominion Energy's UAS manager, up to the stage so that we can talk more about proving value for your drone program at scale. Dominion Energy is a leading drone program here in the US, and TF has been a leader of that program, so I'm excited to welcome him here. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaitlyn.
Yeah, we're just missing the fire.
Yeah, exactly.
For
Marshmallows.
this wonderful fireside chat. So maybe just to kick it off, would love for you to talk about your program. What led Dominion Energy to starting a drone program or even a robotics program more broadly? What were some of the key factors you were thinking about? Where did the program start and where is it today?
So I think one of the key things you mentioned earlier today is what are you trying to accomplish with utilizing the technology? And what we found, and this might resonate with folks in the crowd, is there's so many silos within a business, and a lot of times those silos don't talk to each other. How can we leverage the technology smartly? The ROI is obviously part of that. The financial part of that is a big takeaway element. But how do we utilize that, make sure that we're following the guidelines? Maybe it's aerial drones that are flown. You know, we are land, air, and sea, so we do submersibles as well, crawlers, and flying assets. But how do we make sure that we're staying in the regulatory confinement of that environment to make sure that we're being good stewards of the airspace, following all the regulations? We are a regulated utility, which is very important to us. So how do we bring all that together in one unified group that can actually work across our whole entire company, so the whole entire company feels the value versus one element of your company using data, to your point, using it multiple ways in multiple places versus just one location? So a prime example is we found in our business, one group would go and fly an asset, and then another group would go fly the same asset, and they didn't know that the other group had flown the asset, so that really doesn't make sense, right? So working smarter, not harder. We always use this term in our industry is, what got us here won't keep us here. And that's really important, because if you look at the workforce now too, is the workforce wants to use technology, and how can we leverage that, using it, working smarter, not harder, and being able to really know more information than we've ever known before.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you've had so many different use cases that have come to you in your program over the years. How are you evaluating which use cases are most important to you today versus which ones you're going to tackle 6 months, a year from now? Do you have a rubric or a framework you're following for evaluating different use cases?
So when that really comes down to the big picture, and you mentioned it earlier too, is what is the need? Mm-hmm. That need can shift too. So don't get super focused on one thing, because that will lead you down a trail that, we had a situation just occur that wasn't even on the radar. Now it's on the radar, and it's a big thing that's on the radar. So how do we be flexible, make the right choices, the right decisions, and every day that we continue to come up with use cases.
Yeah, and I know that's something we've talked about as well, is how do you find which drone is the right type of drone to be able to use for those different use cases? How are you evaluating where do I send the crew, which type of drone am I using, which type of use case am I going to prioritize? So as you're thinking about ROI, how are you thinking about that for your team?
It's really the value to our customer. You know, everybody that's in the room here probably works for somebody or works for a corporation or a company, and the value of what you bring to your customer, what their need is, may not be what my need is. And being able to identify that right away is super critical and super important. There's a lot of nice shiny things, and we go out on the floor today and look at all the neat things that are out there, but what is that one thing that's gonna fit the niche that I need to accomplish? And follow that to the end, and you're gonna find the value in that. So we're not really just chasing a bunch of different things, we're focused in on what the need is versus what the want is, because that's two different total things. There's a lot of cool stuff that's out there. I'd love to have it all and utilize it all, but maybe it doesn't have a purpose.
And I know we talked about earlier too with Dominion the value of reliability, affordability, safety for ultimately your customers. Can you talk about what that value is to your aviation and drone program and how you're keeping that a part of the central focus?
Yeah, I mean, that's really a core value of the company, the reliability, affordability, right? Safety is number one in the utility industry and probably in most situations for most of you. But, you know, the real critical part that is when we're focusing in on that reliable ability, there's things out there that we don't know that exist today. If we're able to detect those using AI, perhaps, doing visual inspections, any of those things that we can do to make that a reliable asset to our customers, our ratepayers, our stakeholders in the company, we owe that to our customer to be able to provide that energy that they need so critically important to them and their life. None of this works, none of the lights work, none of those other things if we can't get that power to them. So making that also affordable. If I'm gonna launch a helicopter to do an operation where I can use a drone to do that, that's smart, right? That's gonna save our customers. The rates are gonna be lower. We're not gonna have to raise them because we continually do that. You know, I'm not in the position either to say, hey, we're gonna replace helicopters. You know, we never took that aspect of our operation to go, we're gonna replace something, we're gonna enhance something.
And how have you been able to work with helicopter data, drone data, fixed wing in tandem to be able to get the most value for your program?
Well, like you mentioned in the earlier, you know, when you were talking earlier, is it's really about the value. You know, collecting the data is only the first step in the process. What do you do with that information that you've collected? How can you utilize it? How can you evaluate it? How can you do it quickly? How can you do it affordably? And how can you do it, you know, in the scope of what we're trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish with that information? You know, maybe a 99% accuracy we don't need. Maybe we only need an 80% or a 50% accuracy of that data. So we really need to dial back what we're looking at that is actually going to solve our problem, and it may not be a 99% accuracy on an AI model.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up. I know we've talked a lot about balancing speed and accuracy of the program, and how do you think about what's the right, I guess you say, perfect data that you need as a part of each inspection. And perfect data may not be what you need in order to get to efficiency or scalability. And I think your program's at the luxury where you can weigh those two right now to be able to find what works for you from a scale perspective. But can you talk about how you're thinking about what data is needed to achieve success as a part of each inspection that you're going out with? And how does that shift by inspection type? Maybe it's storms versus a standard inspection.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in a storm, you know, rapidly getting the power restored is a real critical asset for us to be able to go out there and fly those lines very quickly, right? Know where our issues are, get those corrected. The longer term is being able to go out and do comprehensive inspections. It could be transmission, it could be distribution, it could be assets on our renewable energy. We have a big footprint of renewable energy. What is that business, the business that we're working for, what is their need? And identifying that need, what I think may be the need may be different what the business is. So you have to kind of align what that is. But along the roadway, you may discover other things, like you mentioned before, like transmission structures and finding, you know, paint deficiencies or other things that are wrong. Those are the other quick wins or the easy finds that you find later on by using that same data set more than in one place. So super critical there for us.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you've been able to support so many different business units as well, and being able to break down data siloing barriers by being able to use that same data set for multiple teams within the organization. How do you find yourself, you know, do you find yourself serving as kind of that connector in some ways between, hey, I collected this data set for maybe distribution, but veg management can also use it. What role do you serve in that function?
Yeah, we're kind of the person that puts the pieces of the puzzle together, right? So there is that kind of, I wouldn't call it a dysfunction, but there's kind of that separation. And we found when AI first rolled out, and it's been around obviously for a long time, and people didn't understand that, like, how do you link these pieces and parts and put them together in a model that we can understand and look at, and from different aspects of the business, because one business is going to look at it one way, and another one's going to take another look at it and look at it a different way. So it's really interesting in how you can really unpackage that information and then get the best value from that information that's already been collected.
I think that's a really great point. The ability to have data in a way that's easily accessible, again, by maybe a different team, can allow you to tune or train a model so it can be used more than once. That's something we often see with a lot of utilities that we're working with, and it's been great to work with Dominion on that as well, is we can say, hey, we already have this data set. We've already been able to analyze it for these 3 or 4 things. We need to go back and look at the quality of that data set to see if maybe we can get 4 or 5 more additional things from that to support some of the other teams that could use this data set instead of having to mobilize a crew to go back out there to do another data collection. We found that that's really helpful when you have the right framework in place for the data to be managed effectively and easily accessible by teams in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's the other key part of that too, and you touched on it, is data. What do you do with the data? And like you were talking about engaging other businesses within your organization. Super important for us on cyber. We have a very sterile cyber posture with our company. That's very important to our stakeholders. That's one of probably the top thing that we deal with on a daily basis. And then what do you do with the data once you collect it, right? We're collecting enormous amounts of data now that we weren't collecting 4 years ago. We get this question asked all the time. Well, how much storage do you need? And we're like, well, that depends, because that can change next year. Depending on what technology we're using and what the need is, right? So you really have to find that balance and engage those folks early in there, because I'm not going to pick on IT, but they like to have 4-year plan, 5-year plan. Well, when you're looking at drone technology, let's talk a year is that variance, right? It's not 5 years down the road. So things really change, and the flexion of that data collection really varies, and it's really important too for us is to be able to have that to do the predictive analysis.
Sure.
That's a super key part of this equation. If we're able to take our data and have our data, how can we go back and look at it again historically and make good decisions?
That's one thing we're spending a lot of time on, as well as the trend analysis piece like you're talking about, to be able to get to more predictive and prescriptive analysis down the road so you can make better purchasing decisions, especially in a world where supply chain is such a challenge. You can be able to understand where to send crews for more targeted inspections. You can also understand pre and post storm, maybe what anomalies existed were as a result of the storm versus what may have been pre-existing. We just didn't know it. We had the data and we hadn't looked through that particular data set. But I think it's how can you leverage it year over year consistently? And that also gets to this point about workflow, being able to have the data in a way where you can easily retrieve it as opposed to it being collected and sitting on a hard drive somewhere. How could you make value more than once?
So we're kind of leveraging our Esri platform, and we're actually sending a lot of that data into that platform. And for a couple of different reasons, we're able to tell where those assets and that data was collected. We've got a geo reference to where that is, and we're able to do layers, and bringing it back into that platform really works out well for us to be able to go back and do analytic work later on, or to be able to look at that same subset of data and be able to use it for other applications. I think that's really has been a helpful key in our process. Traditionally, in the electric business, the transmission assets got a lot of attention and got a lot of collection of data on them. Distribution was a lower, I wouldn't say a priority, but it didn't get as much of a focus. And we really are kind of shifting that. And that paradigm is basically looking at them both the same way. Because it's just important to get that delivery to your residence or your house or your business versus the actual transmission that's actually pulling it down the line.
Sure, and that's super interesting. I know we've talked about all the different applications that you all are tackling today, but for those who may just be starting a program, could you maybe take us back to the earlier days of the program? How did you start? Where did you, we're talking about bringing in Esri now, bringing in work management, cloud, all of those types of things. Was that on your horizon day one, or how did you bring that into the program?
Yeah, absolutely not. If you think back 4 years ago, before a lot of BV loss waivers were even out there, the first part of the ARC, and I know there'll be discussions about 108, and what that means to businesses in commercial and permanent operations. But when you really look at that, 4 years ago, we were sitting here and that was kind of the dream. Now that's reality. Drone in the boxes are We've got over 23 drone box operations currently right now today, and that is of the first of the year. So you look at that transition period and being able to do that, where we have BV loss operations, where we're flying our critical infrastructure, and being able to do that in the shielded environment. Those were dreams before. Now they're reality. And what does that next 4 years look like for this industry? I think to your point, when you first start off and like we started off, start small. You don't need to spend a lot of money in order to get started. Hit the low-hanging fruit. Find things that there is a need for. And it will rapidly just explode from there when it comes to like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? So all those change and that shift, I think a lot of people are kind of dipping their toe in the water and going, should I get into this? Should I not get into it? And really, like, you've got to get into the pool somewhere. Yeah. You don't have to necessarily jump into the deep end, but at least do something, because to your point, if we're collecting data, maybe it's not a great data set, but we can do something with that. Mm-hmm. Right there, you've already provided value to your customers that you're working for, or your business that you're working for. The operation is super critical, and I think really, when it comes down to, reach out to me, this week at the conference. The networking part of this is so important. And if you haven't taken the opportunity to drink a beer with somebody that you don't know, have a conversation with them, it's super critical. And that's how we all learned in this business. Everybody wants to see everybody succeed. Nobody wants to see anybody fail at what we're doing and how we're leveraging this technology. This is all about success. And if you're not leveraging that and you're not meeting and talking to those folks, my background was law enforcement for 30 years before I got in the utility industry. Like, reach out to me. If you're, a PD starting your program, reach out. Let's have those conversations so you don't stumble over the same place that we stumbled. Learn from our mistakes. Learn from what worked, what didn't work. That is super important. So do not miss that opportunity this week at this conference to do that on the floor, at dinner, at lunch, wherever it is, at Spandex Nation, anywhere. Like, go and meet with people and network, have that conversation, and you're going to learn so much more information than you will, in some of the breakout sessions, to be honest. Like, have that connection. Reach out to me. I'll share the lessons learned, some of those things that we did that we wish we hadn't done, but I think it's really super critical.
Yeah, well, you couldn't miss the opportunity for the Spandex Nation, which I still haven't seen yet. But I think you made some really good points there about, the program and where you started versus where you're going today, and also about how fast the industry is moving. We were talking about this yesterday, but it seems like the industry is moving at lightning speed, especially by utility standards. And that means year over year, there's so much growth. And this conference is a really exciting time each year to see the progress that companies are making, drone programs are making, utilities are making, and it is a really exciting opportunity to be able to connect and learn from lessons so that we can all scale programs faster. One thing I think it's been really compelling is the way that Dominion has built the in-house program that you have, and it's been a very robust in-house scaling program. Was that always a part of the vision, to build an in-house program? And as you've been bringing people along and training people internally, what has that been like? And for others who are evaluating, do I outsource? Do I bring it in-house? What are things you would recommend they consider?
Obviously, we mentioned our safety culture is one of the top pillars of our company, right? The value of having it in-house for us just really makes a lot of sense, right? So we're already into that safety culture, that safety mindset. Cybersecurity is a big one for us, right? So if we have that and we're doing that in-house, we didn't scale up and go out and say we're going to start our program and have 40 pilots. Right now, we support our whole entire footprint of Dominion Energy right now, and we have 11 full-time pilots, which you're like, wow, that's not a lot. It is a lot. We've got surveyors that are pilots, right? Because we had the need to have surveyors on our team to be able to certify documents on the data that we're collecting, right? So we are actually scaling as we need to, and we're able, I use the term, we're only going to kill what we can eat. We are only going to keep increasing that as the need arises, right? So you don't have to start a program and have 50 pilots on your team initially. Start small, build as you see fit, and the need arises, right? And just continue to increase that. Our build out in our program, and this is 6 years ago, obviously COVID came in the middle of that program, was 15 bodies. And what we found was there was a value of bringing people from our businesses. So we've hired linemen into our program that already are familiar with our system. Mm-hmm. We don't have to go train them on what they need to be looking for or what we have asset-wise in our footprint. So that's really critical too, is leveraging the people inside, because you have a lot of people that are screaming on the inside of your company going, that's cool. I really want to go do that. How can I do that? So it's actually a a career advancement for them
Sure.
to use technology that wasn't there before, even 4 years ago. Kids and even a lot of us adults like the game, right? So you're out there, you're used to using that. And you're like, how cool could I be able to use that technology, that skill set, right? Your wife says it's not a skill set, but use that skill set to actually go do something productive with what you've learned, right? So I think that's really the key here is like being inventive, working smarter, not harder.
Sure.
And I really think, scalability, again, start small. Start with one drone, start with one pilot, start with 2 pilots, and then build your program from there. You don't have to be all in from day one.
And I've heard you use the term like force multiplier before, being able to scale a program, leveraging your in-house team, being able to upskill and have people have a new tool that they can, a new tool and a new skill that they can be able to bring to the table is super exciting. And it certainly is a force multiplier. And it's also really exciting, 11 full-time people whose job is solely dedicated to being a part of the drone program and the UAS program, the robotics program, so that you can ultimately tackle so many more use cases. I guess kind of the last point I wanted to bring up is, how do you see automation changing the game? Where do you see it fitting in both in terms of efficiency, and also where do you see it in terms of trust? How do you work with your folks that are on your team to be able to bring automation into the fold in a way that they can trust it and work with it?
Yeah, so I think really one of the key takeaways there is the automation part and how do you trust it, right? Like, we're collecting a lot of information, we're getting, we're running algorithms and we're getting back percentages of accuracy, right? And I really think, that's something really that's kind of been missing in the conversation. I think it's going to be more and more, we're going to have that discussion more on how do you trust the data that you're getting back or the reports that you're getting back from the information you've collected. But I think more importantly is, and I can't stress this enough, if you don't collect it, you're never going to know what those are.
Yeah.
So collecting that data to be able to run through those programs, whatever vendor you select to do those algorithms for you, to get that confidence from what is being produced by those. If you don't have the data, you can't train the model. And really, when it comes down to it, like you said, going to collect it is one part of the equation. But if we don't have things to compare it to, then we're really never going to get that answer. So I think super, super critical in that aspect.
Yeah, we found that keeping the human person centrally involved is a really important part of trust as well. And then transparency and saying, hey, here's what AI can do today. Here's the use cases it can help you solve. Here are the use cases maybe it can't help you solve today, but here's how you can work with it to use it as a tool that is a force multiplier as well for you and your program. It's not here to replace people. It's here to help people make better data-driven decisions. And so I think the perspective and the conversation around it, as well as the transparency, is really important. So I guess my last point before we wrap up, any final thoughts that you have for people here at the conference today? Anything that they should be focusing on? I know you mentioned connecting. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think it's it. Network. Ask questions, learn what you don't know, then you'll know it, right? So just take the time to talk to people that are total strangers to you, and that really opens up your envelope, opens up your horizons. I think That's the key takeaway.
Well, TF, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Kaitlyn.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you to Kaitlyn and TF. I was going to suggest you guys find TF and ask for his Spandex Nation impression, but he kind of beat me to the punch. I think the rest of that conversation, though, I think probably really rings true to a lot of people. It's not just about being able to fly anymore, right? It's about what are you doing with that data? How are you providing that value? How are you scaling that value? And so for the second part of this session, we have a great presentation showcasing a specific example of how this was used in a really interesting project. So for that, I'd like to welcome our next speakers, Carlos Femmer, Chad Maxwell, and Kerry Fleming.
Hey, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. So we're going to get started. My name is Carlos Femmer. I'm the Director of Data Acquisition with HDR Engineering. And we also have here Chad Maxwell, Senior Geomatics Manager, and Kerry Fleming, retired airspace manager. So today's conversation, we're going to talk about a use case of capturing high-definition spatial intelligibility in the Grand Canyon. So we want to welcome you to the Grand Canyon. This was an exciting project for us. The Grand Canyon is 277 miles long, 16 miles wide, 1 mile deep. 2 billion years of Earth's history carved into its walls. And what's exciting about it is just not a landscape. It's not just a landscape, it's a force, a monument in time, resilience, and erosion. And taking a look at what we're able to accomplish here is going to be exciting. So we're going to get into the scale of it. So if you've been in New York and you've seen the Empire State Building, it's 1,250 feet tall. So when you stack 4 on top of each other, that kind of gives you the scale. So that's kind of what we were forced with and experiencing it. Not just from the top and the bottom, we were working with different scenarios where we're dealing with safety issues with respect to heat. Up on the top, it's 98 degrees. We get in the canyon, it's 118 degrees. Being from South Louisiana and the humidity, we're used to that, but we're not used to that level of heat. So we're excited about that too. So today we're going to talk about a framework, and then we're going to go into the case study. So I'm going to hand it over to Chad to talk about, to start us off on the case study.
Thanks, Carlos. Good morning, everybody. So the Grand Canyon for us was a unique project. It's as unique as the landscape. It's huge, it's complex, it's remote, it's got a regulatory overstructure that was difficult to navigate through. It's environmentally sensitive, and it's very unforgiving. So I'm wondering in the room, how many of you have projects with one or more of those elements? Yeah, a lot of hands. The Grand Canyon for us was all of them in one shot. That allows us, though, as we reflect on the work that we did there, it allows us to explicate a framework for our drone program, one that we're going to share with you. But first, we need to unpack a few things. The first thing that, if we're going to, metaphorically, if we're going to find a needle in a haystack, we need to think about our object. So we as humans and productive people, we're called forward to make order or organize the possibility that life presents to us, right? We have a duty to understand the world around us and then shape and reshape, or in many cases, like in the Grand Canyon, preserve what's happening there. And so how do we do that? So first, if we want to make better decisions, we need to think about a few things. Better decisions are usually better allocations of resources, or as we say within the HDR world, making great things possible. It requires more and better data. Well, when we say more and better data, what do we mean? At HDR, what we mean by more and better data is data that are contextually rich and spatially aware. And drones, for us, are an amazing tool to help us do that. So why is it the right choice for us, and why is it the right choice for you? So, as we navigate through the complexity that we find ourselves in, and as we understand the world around us and we work to shape it, we have to understand that we're meaning makers. So we're people that are engaged in a learning process, and so it's the same for us at the project level. It's the same for us at the company level. We know that observations generate data. Data analysis turns to information. Aggregated information turns to knowledge, and then hopefully action and prudent action. And so we need to move from here, which you see is sort of blurry, low resolution kind of image, right, to something much more defined, crisp, understandable. Okay, and so we'll talk about what that framework, we were able to explicate that framework for us at HDR, and we'll share that with you. All right, so here's our framework. It's built on 3 premises. So the first is observation, and in large part in the Grand Canyon and through many other high-profile projects, We've used drones to do that observation. Drones provide unique access, a unique perspective, and many other qualities that we're able to leverage through that learning process that we looked at a minute ago. The second level is intelligibility, and specifically for us, spatial intelligibility is a big deal because what we want to do is we want to reflect the places, the built-in natural world that we find ourselves operating in, into the digital space. So instead of bringing more people to the project site, or in this case the Grand Canyon, which is not logistically possible in many ways, we want to reverse the direction of flow and bring the site to more people. So we reflect the built natural world into the digital space so that it's understandable and we can overlay multidisciplinary intelligence on top of the data that we collect. And that unlocks collaboration. It allows us to broaden the stakeholder base, and so we get, as a result of that, we get better decisions, better allocations of resources, and we are able to make great things possible, and that's the value segment. And so I'm going to hand back over to Carlos to walk through the case study.
Appreciate it. So our challenge in upgrading the water system located in one of the most rugged environments on Earth. So there were a couple challenges that we were faced with that we were brought onto it. They had a power system that we're looking to inspect and map. They had the need for, and sometimes you have to look for an opportunity. The purpose of us coming in the first place is we're replacing the Trans-Canyon water line. It's reached its extended use and life, so replacing that was important. There's 6 million people and 6 million visitors that visit the park yearly. That's the lifeline of the park. You need water. A lot of folks like to go and hike in this amazing environment. So if we look back at observation, intelligibility, and value, let's apply it to the project. The first one is 1,000 acres of terrain documentation, power system inspection, and then also the pump house. A lot of this information, there was no documentation, no as-built. We were brought in, so in our piece, we had to bring in drones, different types of drones, quadcopter, fixed-wing drones. We also had survey, we had LiDAR equipment. All of that was needed to apply to it. So applying it back to the framework that Chad mentioned, the observation is the one critical piece. The second piece is getting permission. This is the fun part. So we've been fortunate to fly and inspect the Golden Gate Bridge, Pearl Harbor, 25 DoD bases, some sensitive sites as well that required some sensitive clearance. And in every case, I think we're at a 100% no rate initially. But once we're able to get past it and work a few things, we're at a 99% approval. So if you think about it, what happens is you come with a complex project, you're going to get a no. And with us, within HDR, whenever we get the no, it's fun for us because we expect it. But when we work with different project managers and they get the no, they get all fired up and stuff, and we're like, hey, let's just work it. In this particular case of the Grand Canyon, there's different airspace as well. So in the case of the national park, you got to get the National Park Service. You have to have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, FAA as well. So I think a key component is making sure all stakeholders are good. In the wildlife area, they wanted to make sure that we can protect the endangered condors. So we had a biologist with us. They had the radar, or the, what do you call it?
Radio
Antenna?
detection.
So the radio detection, and they're kind of saying, okay, it's over here, then let's start here, is one component. The other piece is on the National Park Service. This was the first permitted waiver approval inside the national park. So we had the park superintendent sign off, and we went to the FAA, and they said no. And I said, well, how do you do that? So if you're familiar with the FAA, you got the Western, Central, Eastern region, and this is where Mr. Kerry comes in. So we got to know, and we're like, okay, well, we have the approval. What are we missing? So we went to the airspace manager, which is Kerry, and kind of talking about, we have all the components in place. We need approval to proceed. How do we proceed? So Kerry, we just wanted to maybe bring you in and kind of talk about your perspective on companies getting permission, looking for to get into this airspace, and what's your perspective and your background of, from your view, and then also putting yourself in our shoes?
Well, thank you, Carlos, and Chad, what you started in with. So what's interesting, a lot of people in this room that are in public safety and in the utility critical infrastructure, they were aware of our program with my group, Airspace Security. We had a tool that we had called an SGI waiver, Special Governmental Interest. And that gave us the legal authority to leverage our, what we determined to be critical for not just public safety and not just utility companies, but for commercial operations. Because an SGI is special governmental interest, but it doesn't just mean the government. But as you already mentioned, that you have these other federal agencies that all want to ensure that their programs are being protected and what is valuable to them. And then it comes down to the airspace. It's unique airspace around the Grand Canyon. And in fairness to the service centers, it was a unique situation that they weren't comfortable with because they dealt mainly with manned aviation or unmanned aviation where it was cut and dried. It was in Class B airspace or Charlie or Delta. And then you have this unique situation. And that's where my group thrives, where your company and other companies that are trying to do the same thing are faced with a no, that they can't get the airspace authorization. So you come to my group and we figure it out. It's much easier if you already have the approvals from the other agencies, but we had situations where they didn't have that. And we would go and we would have those conversations. And a lot of times we had to exert our muscles and tell them airspace belongs to the FAA. We don't care what you think. And if you deny this operation, we're going to go and we're going to dig out all your COAs and we're going to really do a thorough review and determine if maybe those are something that needs to be reconsidered. And it's amazing what type of approvals you get and what type of buy-ins you get from these other government agencies when you're coming in as, I'm not going to say bullies, but what we needed to do was get to yes. And if the only obstacle was someone wasn't comfortable with the particular type of flight operation, that wasn't acceptable to us. So we would say we are going to give them the airspace access and authorization. We're going to notify air traffic, and we are going to allow them to conduct these flight operations because there's obviously a need for it, and there's obviously some ROI considerations, and we don't want to be the obstacle. One of our core missions, goals, was to not be an economic hindrance to commercial operations. And that was really, it really showed itself in this particular situation, but we had others where commercial interests need to get into certain airspace, and they would come to us and we would work with them and we would figure it out and get to yes. That was always the goal, get to yes.
Yep, and we're going to go into more detail. We have a breakout this afternoon that's going to be 45 minutes long. So now, appreciate it, Kerry. That's to learn more about the airspace, we'll talk about it. One of the things we'll show here is kind of logistics. Getting equipment in is, sometimes you have fun on the project, and every now and then you take the win. So this is a challenging thing. One of the big components is being able to show that it is difficult to get equipment in and out. And when we go into the ROI, it's critical because we're talking about survey equipment, LiDAR equipment, drones, different types of drones. And here's the fixed wing aircraft taking off. You can kind of see it from the ground. Amazing. And then we had the Skydio that was doing some inspections, so we're pretty pumped about that. Taking a look at the next piece. This is kind of taking a look at the drone taking off. Again, we had limited space, takes off vertically. We're doing a high-end mapping across a lot of components. We'll get to a few things here. I'm going to fast forward it in the interest of time. Intelligibility, again, we're going to go through the breakout, but one is a virtual site visit, being able to bring the whole component and the whole project to the site. So this, instead of sending a bunch of bidders into a canyon and having to walk in, we're able to bring the data through a virtual site visit as one component. The second one is being able to see the unseen. This was a gaping hole before. Again, we'll show that this afternoon, but in the middle there's a black hole. That's what they were working with updated imagery. That's a big component. We talked about when everyone can see the same thing, terrain, infrastructure, and risk. We're not just aligned, we're advancing together. Digital twin, that's another big component. From the drone, being able to map all of this out and then overlay the pipeline was a good component. Being able to inspect the assets, again, being able to go in, the old way was doing it from the ground. Well, you don't get the perspective from the top. So here you can see cracks and other things. This was a big impact in being able to decide what to do with it. I think the decision was made to replace. The as-built, again, inside of the canyon, had no proper documentation, so we're able to scan it inside and out, bring it into Revit, bring it into civil design drawings. And lastly, the nice part is having this particular data set where we're able to overlay our data with the survey data that was collected, and then have that data served to engineers and geotechnical folks and whatnot. Do you want me to go through this?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the last slide we just looked at, you saw the survey data overlaid top the imagery and the digital model that we made. That really speaks into the value. That's one component. So when we looked at the learning process before, that's aggregating data onto the model and then being able to broadcast that out to our wider team. That allowed civil engineers and structural engineers and pipeline engineers and a whole team of folks, planners and environmental folks to understand what's happening there and be able to iterate the design without going back to the field. So when we talk about the value, the value's hung on the top two parts of our tier, the ability to observe and collect wide context, contextually rich data that's spatially informed, and then being able to mirror that into the digital space so that we can get more eyeballs looking at it, yields better decisions and unlocks sort of the value chain that comes as an outflow. Here's a few, specifically, value pieces, but for me as a surveyor, being able to see what's unseeable and to detect what's, using a variety of sensors to detect the unseen things that are happening, that's a big deal. That's a huge value thing. That's something only the drone platform can offer at the types of resolution that we need to make decisions. And with that, I want to just bring in Carlos and Kerry. So we had a lot of help with this Grand Canyon project. It started with our regulatory partners and with the folks that were needed in approval. But it also we relied on Wingtra and Skydio and Trimble and a whole host of folks that are represented in this room. And so we sincerely thank you for, we're standing on your shoulders. And if you want to learn more about, go into greater detail, with this project, come see us, as Carlos mentioned in the afternoon session. But we have a specific challenge. Yes.
Yep, so our challenge to you is how can you approach your own projects with this framework? And I think now we're excited to be here, and if you have any questions, as a TF mentioned earlier, and Kaitlyn, feel free to reach out. We're excited to talk about the project, and we'll have an opportunity this afternoon. But thank you guys, appreciate it, Matt.